Hey guys, been a while since I've been in the shop. Unfortunately, some life events prevented me from being out here, but I'm back out and back in and making videos again. And today I want to talk to something that I was sort of, I don't want to say forced to do, but I did do. I bought 3 sheets of particle board. And as you can see, my cabinets back here, they have plywood throughout them. And basically I use maple plywood because at the time I bought all my sheets of maple plywood, they were $50 a sheet. And then they went up to 55 and I thought, oh, they're getting expensive. But I recently went back to get some more. And to finish, I have I have a pantry and a couple big cabinets to make a one-upper. And I have enough plywood to do all the rest of my cabinets, but I do want to have some wood left over for some other projects. And I went back, and the price of plywood, or maple plywood now, is $110 a sheet. And I thought, well, that's just crazy. But that's what it is, so that's what it is. So I re-looked at my drawings, and there are a lot of spots in there that we never see the inside of the cabinet, like my pantry outside of the one finished side. All the rest of the wood will never be seen because they're going to have pull-out shelves. So that can use a cheaper wood, hence why I have the particle board. Now, the particle board per sheet is, this one I think was $31 a sheet, so I ended up buying 3 sheets. So I'm going to cut them and use them for the inside of the cabinets. Now, this is not unusual. When we owned the cabinet shop, my dad and I owned a cabinet shop, we used particle board all the time instead of plywood. It's easy to use. It holds the nails pretty well as compared to like MDF. And it can glue up easy. It does suck up a little bit more glue than plywood, but it does hold together with glue pretty well. Not as strong. It's flat. The one thing about it is heavy. I think this sheet right here is like 96 pounds or something like that for a sheet. So when you start building cabinets out of it, it gets pretty heavy, especially when you're using 3/4 stock. And a lot of times you'll see cabinet makers use 1/2 inch stock. I haven't had any in the shop. Actually, I have some scrap pieces of MDF that I was going to show you, but I had no scrap pieces of particle board because I don't think I've ever purchased a sheet of it, at least not in some time. But let's talk about it. You know, the advantages of using this, when you should use it, and you know, when you shouldn't. Now, the nice thing about it is it's inexpensive, it's uniform, and it's stable. It doesn't warp or it doesn't shrink and expand. However, it shouldn't be used around water because even with a finish on it, any water that gets in, it does swell up. And the glue that's used in it does have a smell, does give off a smell. Well, it's you know, it is what it is. When you do use it in the shop, I would recommend using your older saw blade. I don't use my, you know, nice rip cut or cross cut blades on particle board or MDF. I always use, you know, the older blade because it'll work just as well. So what's the difference between MDF and particle board? Well, MDF is a little finer fiber. It gives a nice finish when you want to go paint it. Both of them paint really well. So if you're looking to make something for paint grade or looking for shop cabinets, it works pretty well. Like this piece here I use for a clamp cart. And so I used MDF and I laminated on hardwood on top, and it makes a pretty nice finish on it. It's stable. This thing has been sitting in my scrap bin for probably 4 or 5 years and it's still, you know, rock solid and hasn't warped at all. But I think all the parts that are not going to be seen in my cabinet, I'm going to use the particle board for them. And there's nothing wrong with using it. You just have to accept what it is. Now, you don't want to have it for any length that is unsupported. So you don't want to have this for like a shelf, like bookshelf. This would be the worst thing in the world to have for it. If you do have any horizontal parts, now vertical, it holds up pretty good. It has pretty good support that way. Horizontally, this is not very stable. Now, if you had a piece of hardwood that you would you know, screw on or attach this way, so this was underneath, then that would give it some extra support because this won't flex that way. But you definitely don't want to make something like here. These are the inner frames that I have on these cabinets that go between the drawers back here. And This is nice and solid with the plywood, but you don't want to use it with particle board or with MDF because this just doesn't have much strength going this way. And you could actually, hit this on your knee and break it real easy. So the other thing, as comparing this to plywood, is that this will finish pretty good if you want to put a decorative edge on it or something like that. And again, I would use my cheaper router bits on that. I wouldn't use an expensive carbide bit. This holds an edge pretty good. It has enough fiber where it cleans up pretty well. Much better than particle board. So MDF would be, my first choice if you're going to use something paint grade and put an edge on it. And then particle board, would be a second choice. But I don't know how. Probably bullnose it over, or maybe cove it out. But I wouldn't put too fancy of an edge on it because once it does get thin, it gets rather weak. The other advantage between particle board and MDF, and the fact that it is stable, is you don't get these little gaps that you get in plywood. So a lot of times, depending on how cheap the plywood is, and this one's not too bad actually, but this has little marks in here, and I'll try to get some close-ups for you, little openings. And if you have some cheaper plywood, you have some big gaps in there. So you have the finished piece on top, and then you have these layers of wood, of other plywood or solid wood, and there'll be some gaps where they glue it up. Now in the shop, for shop cabinets or for shop benches, this stuff works pretty good as long as you have it supported. Like I said, you don't want to have long spans unsupported and heavy equipment on it. You want to have it supported as much as possible. And even braced up if needed be underneath would help it out. I don't know if MDF is heavier than particle board off the top of my head. I guess I should have checked into that. But the MDF is really good for like making patterns, like 1/4-inch MDF or hardboard is really good for making any patterns in your shop. I use MDF a lot for making jigs, and it's a nice flat board for making jigs. The other thing is that when you're going to paint MDF or particle board, the edges really soak up the paint quite a bit. So you want to put some type of sealer, a really good sealer, a couple coats of sealer on the edge. You want to put sealer all the way around before you paint, but a couple good coats of sealer on the edge to make sure that you seal it up. Now some people use wood glue. They thin down wood glue and paint it on there, and that gives it a nice surface for paint to go on so it doesn't soak in. Particle board, especially, the edges soak up quite a bit, and particle board edges will almost always be rough as compared to MDF. Now the other big part about using these two, like in the shop, is that if you use screw and glue in them, you really want to pre-drill those holes. You want to make them deeper because they tend to split. If you get really wide screws in them, it tends to split, and sometimes that could be a problem. So pre-drilling is a must. And again, if it's on the floor, if something is touching the floor, you don't want MDF or particle board directly touching the floor, especially if it's unsealed, because it will soak up the moisture off of concrete or any spills that happen. And once it does that and it starts expanding, it pretty much never stops. Where, wood, you get maybe a little bit of warp or you get some water discoloration, but it won't expand and come apart as quickly as these two products will. So I don't know if that helped you at all. It's just some of my experience with particle board. Particle board and MDF are perfectly fine to use what you're going to use them for. Hidden spots inside cabinets that you don't see, perfectly fine to use for. It does add a lot of weight to the cabinet, so if you use it on upper cabinets or large pantry like this one is going to be, I'm definitely going to need a couple people to help me move that thing, because that will be a good hefty cabinet. So let me know in the comments if you use particle board or MDF in your shop and what you use it for. Hopefully this has helped you decide on when to use plywood as opposed to MDF or particle board. But they all have a place in our shop. They all have a place in woodworking. You just have to pick and choose what, when, and where you want to use this. And I think if you know how to use particle board and MDF, it can really work out. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Love to have you around in my next video, because I'm going to be doing quite a bit out here now that I can get back out in the shop, and the spring is sprung, so I'm starting to get warmed up out here. and I will be out here working quite a bit. Thanks for watching.